as you can see, the topic that I mentioned in the brochure says the limitless arena of research in language. And I would like to share a little bit about my personal background today. Whatever example I'll be giving will be from my own personal experience. And I've made a lot of mistakes in my journey towards doing my, PhD. So I would like to share the same thing so that people who are interested in publishing research papers or doing their own, thesis might be able to get a few hints from what I've done and not repeat those. Okay, so in 2007, I completed my master's in 2002, as ma'am said, and in 2007, after around 4 or 5 years of teaching communication skills, I wanted to get into research, and I was interested in learning what differentiates successful speakers from not so successful speakers. What are the characteristics or what are the factors that distinguish good speakers from not so impressive speakers? So I wanted to do on communication and obviously communication in society. So I went and approached the sociology department, and I said that I want to register for a PhD, and they looked at me with a very strange glance and said that unless you have a master's degree in sociology, there's no way that you can register for a PhD. I got a little disheartened, but then I went and approached the psychology department. They threw me out. I went to the linguistics department. They threw me out. And so when I had no other option, I came back to the English department. And I was pretty young and green behind the ears. So what I did was I ultimately changed my topic because I could not find a guide who was willing to, take up a multidisciplinary research. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is, 1 minute. Yeah, what I'm going to be talking about is integrative research. Now, if the word integrative is new for many of us, we can also, replace this word with multidisciplinary. I think multidisciplinary would be a better word here. So what I exactly mean by multidisciplinary research, I'm going to go to the next slide to explain. Now, here is news from the internet. It's about the UP police catching a killer of an 8-year-old boy, and he had sent a ransom note. And the only way the police could catch the killer was because of the spelling mistakes that he made while typing out his ransom note. So you will notice that it is all thanks to the effort of linguists and detectives that this criminal was caught in the first place. I'm going to be sharing another example here. Now, this is a translating device, and this device was created by linguists. They had, and programmers also, who had worked towards making this device. And you will notice that the three languages which are there, Japanese, Mandarin, Spanish, and English, Korean was introduced in 2019, and this is exactly where we need to pitch in, because I don't see translators translating many of the Indian languages. So this is where maybe linguists from the Hindi department or the Kannada department, or for that matter any other language department can pitch in. Next here, I'm going to show an interesting example of the Manipuri language. Now, the Manipuri language is actually a branch of the Sino-Tibetan language, but in India, they have been using the Bengali script to write their language, because somewhere along the line, they lost their own script. And the Bengali script has certain sounds which is not required by the Manipuris to write their language. And the Manipuris have a few sounds which are not there in the Bengali scripts. And even with this kind of drawback, for years they have been using the Bengali script. Now, thanks to the effort of linguists and anthropologists, they have been able to revive the Manipuri script. And today, the state government has made it compulsory for primary education to introduce the Manipuris to their own script. Next, I would like to show you this feature of Gmail. Now, when you go to Gmail with the recent updates, you will notice that when you're typing in Gmail prompts you with the following words to complete your sentence, and most of them, most of the time, these words are so bang on target that you just swipe and you are able to finish that sentence without having to type those many words. So this is a feature which was possible only because of linguists working with statisticians. Now, why would we need statisticians? Because people generally construct sentences in this pattern. So the possibility, the probability of how often people would start a sentence with a word like this and how often it would follow with these remaining words is figured out by statisticians, and the probability, and then programmers programmed it, and this is how the Gmail prompt works. I would like to share one last example here. Now, this is a hand glove, and you will notice that this is used to convert your hand gestures, hand signs to speech, and this is used by people who are mute and cannot speak. And this was only possible because of the integrative research of linguists, doctors, and programmers. So this is basically an idea of what I'm going to be looking at today. Most of us, when we are researching language, we're stumped when it comes to finding out newer areas of research, because mostly we are looking at theoretical research. The moment we diversify into different areas, then the arena is actually limitless. So let me go to the next slide. The next slide, I'm going to be talking about what I plan to do with this webinar today. Now, research methodology, or training someone in how to go about doing research, is almost a year's course. So I possibly cannot be doing justice to the topic in just an hour. So what I've done is I have taken a funnel approach, and I'm going to be talking about general research, and then I'll move to specific language research. And my plan is that first I want to create an awareness about why we need research in the first place if everything is going so fine, and what are the upcoming areas of research in terms of language. Now, once I have been able to touch upon, I cannot be doing a very in-depth study, but once I've been able to touch upon some of the newer areas, I'm going to be helping maybe some of you who are interested to boil down to an area and decide that, okay, this is one area that I find interesting and I would like to engage in some sort of research. And then you get into action, and what you get will be your research. So my purpose is basically to get you interested into doing research in language. So I have divided my session today into 6 parts. The first part, I'll be talking about why do we need research in the first place? And secondly, why do we need research in language specifically? Third thing I'm going to be talking about, there are different types of research, and research has different purposes. The goal of different type of research is different. So I want to take you through some of the basic purposes, and then I would like to help you figure out for yourself which kind of research you should be undertaking, what will make sense for you. Because today I have a mixed audience. I have school teachers, I have a master's degree student, I have students who are already registered for their PhDs, and also have people who are college professors. So your purpose of undertaking research would be different, so you have to decide which one makes sense for you. Next, I'm going to be talking about the few upcoming areas of research in language. And next, I'll be talking about a few words of advice while you engage in research in language. I was talking about some of the mistakes that I did, and it took me a whole lot of time to finish my PhD because I pretty much went into research without having any idea about it. So I would not like other people to suffer the same thing. So if I'm going to the first aspect of my webinar today, what I'm going to be talking about, what is the need for research? Now, research, most of the time, when we hear the word, it brings to our mind the word headache. We generally don't want to get into research until and unless there is a strong motivation. Maybe the motivation would be to get a better job or maybe a better salary. So these are some of the only reasons why people get into research. But I feel that research can be looked at it in a very different way. That if you're the kind of person who sees a problem in front of you and you have a dying urge to solve that problem, to find a solution to that problem, then you are already a researcher. You already have the spirit of a researcher. You really don't need to publish a lot of papers in a journal in order to call yourself a researcher. For example, as a teacher of language, maybe in the school level, you want to teach phonetics to your students. And for that, you look at 5 or 6 different books and you settle down on one particular author because you feel that this person has explained the concept in a very simple way. So when you look at 6 different options and you narrow down on one particular one, what you're basically doing is research. So let us not think about research, in terms of, how long and how complicated it is. The magnitude of a research is really decided by how useful that research is. It might take you maybe a week to do a research, but the application and the usefulness of that research might be a long term. So next, I'm going to be talking about what are the problems that research can solve. Obviously, people will not do research until and unless there's a purpose to it. So as I see it, the first thing research does is it fills in gaps in our knowledge. I'll be giving example from all walks of life because here I'm talking about research in general. So initially when COVID happened, researchers told us that it is a spread through contact. But now recent research tells us that, oh, it's worse than what we thought. It is right now airborne. So, just wearing mask and wearing gloves might not be helping us. So this is, where there is gaps in our knowledge, and, research is filling in those gaps. Next, I'm going to be talking about improving poor practices. So let me give an example. India was always very keen on theoretical teaching. We lean heavily towards theories, and research has shown that a good balance of theory and practical is what will make learners learn faster. So now that we have shifted from purely theoretical classes to maybe a good balance of theory and practice, what we have done is we have replaced poorer practices. I would also give one more example. My father used to tell that they were taught English in a way where it was dependent on rote learning, as in the teacher would read out sentences and the students would repeat the sentences, and in case they repeated it wrong, the teacher would hit them with a cane. So they believed in the behavioral theory of learning a language, but research has shown us that it's a poor practice. People learn a language by using it for communication. So the communicative theory is a newer practice and a better improved practice. Going to the next one, I'm going to be talking about optimization. So we have understood the importance of practical sessions along with theory, but what works for maybe a classroom in the US will not work for India. An American teacher might have maybe 10 or 15 students in the classroom. For her to conduct any practical activity, to conduct a game, to conduct a task-based activity is not very difficult. But the same thing cannot be done in India, because in India we have maybe 60 to 70 students in each classroom. And how a teacher modifies a practical session so that it can be done by all the 60 students is optimization. So India is very famous for the word jugaad, and I really like it that we always find a way out of the problem and to do something in the best possible way. And this is another word for optimization. Bringing in innovation. We have already moved from poorer farming practices to newer farming practices. But even with newer farming practices, the yield that we get is not enough to feed the population. So innovation has moved to genetically modified food. So now we are getting larger quantities of food, maybe, not so tasty, but better quality of food. So this is known as bringing innovation. When I'm talking about my students, I see nowadays that my students have stopped using, notebooks. They use pads, iPads, or tabs to take down their notes. And this is actually innovation because it is helping us go green. Coming to the next point is keeping pace with change. suddenly we have been, forced to move from traditional teaching to online teaching, and we've made this transition. And only because we could make this transition has life continued, in a way that it has right now. So the research also helps you to, keep pace with change. For example, imagine if there were no platforms like Zoom or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams, how difficult would be to conduct anything. Forget about education, even the entire IT sector, everything would go kaput because if there were no research. And the last aspect of research is when we avert a future crisis. We have already learned from our mistakes. Sometimes we don't, but also at times we're warned. I was talking about the students, insisting on going green because maybe they understand that we have chopped down all the trees. Where do we get more paper from? We've already harmed the climate. So in order to, stop further, damage to our earth, maybe we are already making changes. So, all of these are areas that research can help us with. Okay, next I'm going to be talking about that, why should you undertake research? Because as I said on the first slide, that research, involves a lot of headache, a lot of effort. So the way I look at it is, if you indulge in research, if you undertake research, it's a two-way thing. First, you help others with your findings, whatever you have found out, your research might help and will help a lot of other people, avoid similar pitfalls maybe that you have been facing. And the next part is, the most interesting part is that when you help others, you also help yourself to fame. The moment you are an established researcher, you become an expert in your field. So you will see a lot of people coming to you, approaching you, for maybe more advice on your subject area. So I look at it as a quid pro quo, which is a Latin phrase which says that if you give, you will get. If you give back to society, society will give it back to you. So don't look at the research as a headache. You putting your time and effort will definitely pay back sometime. This is all I have to say, why you should undertake research. Next, I'll be moving at, why conduct research in language. In one of my webinars, I had shown a graph where India, I think, is at the fourth or the fifth position in terms of the number of research dissertations or theses that we churn out. But when you look at the classification, you will realize that most of the research in terms of, in English is focused on literature. Now, let us talk about language. When we're talking about language, a language is a very practical aspect of living. Everything that you do in life is because of language, whether you, go out shopping, you communicate with your maid, you teach in the classroom, you apply for a job, you go for an interview, and even a doctor who is maybe operating in the operation theater, he needs to communicate with the other doctors and the teachers. So everything is basically focused on language. So it helps us to do research on language, because at the end of the day, language is a source of our living. Next is, I'm going to be talking about how only a few Indians do research in language. Now, this, I was trying to sit and think that why is it so that there is so less focus on language research, is because in India, most of the universities do not have, or do not offer a course in language, or language teaching or language learning. They have courses in English literature, they have courses in pure linguistics, but there is nothing in terms of language. So as such, when there are no courses offered, people are not enrolling. And then, because you have been brought up on a diet of a lot of theoretical knowledge, we lean more towards literature review kind of research. Because again, people from the humanities side, we are not very strong with a mathematical intelligence. So the moment we think of research and empirical research, statistical analysis, we feel so scared. We feel like, okay, forget it, let me stick to literature. So maybe these are some of the reasons why only a few people in India do research in language. And because there are only few people, it's a relatively unexplored, uncharted territory. Now, when something is unexplored, that is exactly the place where you need to pitch in your research, because you have so many avenues that you can pursue in terms of research in language. Now, when I'm talking about research in language, it also gives you the scope for recognition. In literature, you will find that there are so many guides, there are so many people, there are so many experts. But I will give you an example of myself. Since the lockdown, when I've started doing webinars, I've realized that a lot of people have started approaching me, for some kind of guidance on research in language. And it's not because I'm very knowledgeable in this field. It's because there are only a fistful of people who are in this field in the first place. So, you don't have a lot of options. So what I'm trying to say is that if you indulge in research in language, your scope to, be in the limelight, to be noticed by people is a lot higher than if you do research in maybe literature, because already it is kind of, exhausted in terms, in a way you can say. Next, I'm going to be talking about that, research in language will make a real difference. I have shown you how you are using devices every day, how you're using Siri, or, you're using, your other smart devices, and how language is at the pivotal point of everything. So it makes a real difference when you're doing research in language. And I think this is, what I can say to convince you that this is a really interesting area that maybe you can delve into. Okay, next I'm going to be talking about the different types of research and their purpose. So here again, I will not be able to go into great depth, but what I want to do is just do a overall classification so that you get some idea about what kind of research might work for you. So when I'm talking about the basic classification of research, the first kind of research that people are willing to undertake is the descriptive kind of research. Now, in descriptive research, what you do is you just take a random sample of people and you study them. What do? You observe their behavior and you study them. Now, you will notice that I have said that it is non-comparative, which means that I'm not comparing the behavior of one group of people with another group of people. I'm just studying the behavior of a random group of people. So it is non-comparative and it is observational, because I am not doing anything to them. I'm not interfering with their behavior. I am just, observing them, and I'm going to describe my observation. So when we are talking about descriptive research, it establishes the behavior, thoughts, and feelings of a group of people. Now, it can answer questions like, what kind of activities do students enjoy in the classroom? When is the right time to start teaching grammar to children? Where do children learn better? Is it in the home setting, or is it in the classroom setting, or they learn better when they're interacting and playing with their friends, maybe? And, how do you improve and make students maybe interested in what you're teaching in the classroom? But what descriptive research cannot do is give you an answer why. Descriptive research cannot identify a cause for a behavior. It can talk about what behavior people are showing, what people are feeling, and what people are thinking, but it cannot tell you why people are doing it this way. So you cannot prove anything in terms of descriptive research. So let me give you an example to clarify what is descriptive research. So suppose you have been teaching in the traditional way in your classroom, the same way that our teachers taught us maybe 30 or 40 years back. Open the textbook, start explaining, give them some exercises at the end. Now somebody has been talking to you, and they have been sharing with you that game-based teaching has made a difference in the classroom. So you decide to introduce game-based teaching in your classroom. And once you introduce game-based teaching in your classroom, you realize that, oh my God, my students are really happy. They are more engaged, and they are more willing to come to my lectures. They're more willing to sit for my session. Previously, maybe students would drop out, they would not come to school or college. But now, because you have introduced some type of games in the classroom while teaching, your students are more engaged. So This is your descriptive research where you describe the engagement and the happiness of the students. Now, as a researcher, you want to know that, okay, my students are more involved, my students are more happy. I want to see if this happiness translates into better results. So you want to study it a little deeper. So if you want to go a little deeper into research, then what you are doing is you're moving from descriptive research to correlational research. Now, correlational research, again, like I said with descriptive research, you are observing a random group of people, and it is observational. Hence, it is non-comparative because you're not comparing with anybody else. You're just teaching the group of students in the game-based teaching, and you're just observing, whether their results have improved. So, in correlational research, you are trying to establish a relationship between variables. Now, what is variable? Factors. Game-based teaching is a factor, and how what is happening is students are happy. So students being happy and game-based teaching are factors. So you want to see if there is a relation between game-based teaching, students being happy, and their performance improving. So these are known as variables. So correlational research talks about you trying to establish and find out if there is a connection between factors or variables. Now, it can only draw inferences, it cannot say for sure, and it cannot prove anything. So let me just give you the example, and then you'll understand what I mean by it cannot prove anything, it can only draw references. So what I do is I teach my students with game-based teaching, and after 6 months of teaching them, I take an exam. Okay, I conduct an exam for them, and when I see the results, I realize that, oh my God, my students have actually scored better than the previous semester. So students have been happy, and as a result, that the fact that they are happy, they have scored better. Now, you can draw a relation between game-based teaching and better results, but you cannot be sure that the better results are only because of game-based teaching. For example, you are teaching them online, so students have not been traveling to school, so they have a lot of time to devote to studies. Maybe the better results is because of the extra time that they have, which they would otherwise spend in traveling to school and colleges. So you want to eliminate all other possibilities, and you want to prove that it is because of game-based teaching that students have done better results. So in that case, what you have to do, you have to move into experimental research, because that's the only way you can mathematically or empirically prove a claim. Okay, so in experimental research, what happens is that you have a group of people and you pick them and check their performance against another group. So that's why it is known as comparative research. That means you have your experiment group, you do something to these people, and you don't do the same thing to the other group of people. So these people are known as the control group, whom you don't do anything with, and these are the experimental group of people. Now, it is interventional. What does interventional mean? It means that I am deliberately teaching the experiment group in game-based teaching, but I'm deliberately not teaching the control group in game-based teaching. So I am doing some sort of manipulation. I'm manipulating something that I'm testing. So hence it is known as interventional. Now, when you're talking about experimental research identifies the cause and effect, which means it says that game-based teaching is the cause, and because of game-based teaching, the results have improved. And this, you can do it in a statistical or mathematical way so that there is no doubt. So let me explain in terms of diagram how this happens. So I teach game-based teaching in section A, which is my experimental group. But in section B, which is my control group, I continue teaching in the traditional way that I was to do before. After teaching for 6 months, I conduct an exam and I find that group A, whom I was teaching on game-based teaching, they have performed and their results are better than the previous semester. However, the results for group B, where I'm still teaching in the traditional way, there is no significant change in the results. So now I'm in a better position to say that only because of game-based teaching, the results have improved because all other factors are same. I am teaching them online, both the groups I'm teaching them online, but the only difference is here I'm teaching them with game-based teaching, here I'm not teaching them. So obviously game-based teaching is the cause that made the students perform better. So this is known as experimental research. So when I'm talking about descriptive research, it just describes your observation. When I'm talking about correlational research, it establishes a connection, but it cannot prove a connection. Whereas I'm talking about experimental research, it proves a definitive connection mathematically. So when we are talking about research in sociology or psychology, mostly people go into descriptive correlational. I'm not saying that they do not or cannot go into experimental, but when we're talking about language, the beauty of language is that most language research can be measured, can be quantified. So hence, one must try and look into experimental research. Now, descriptive research, let me give you an example of descriptive research. People who are very smart, what they will do is they will study, 5 or 6 different platforms. They will study Zoom, they will study Google Meet, they will study Microsoft Teams, Cisco WebEx and all, and they will publish a paper saying that this one Zoom is the most preferred by the people. They will conduct a survey, they'll ask for people's opinion, and they just go and describe the different platforms and they go and publish a paper. This is known as a descriptive paper. So, people who are smart, they identify topics immediately and they strike when the iron is hot. Okay. Now, let me go to a deeper classification of research. Now, the first one I've already explained extensively in the previous one, that you have descriptive, a little more concrete than that is correlational. Now, experimental is the most concrete form of research. Now, when you're talking about data, descriptive research, you can depend entirely on qualitative data, which talks about people's opinions and thoughts. For correlational, you can ask people about their thoughts and things like that, but you can also conduct some sort of test, so it can be quantitative also, so it can be a mixed amount of data that you collect for correlational. But when you're talking about experimental research, then at least 80 to 90% of your data collected should be quantitative in nature, because without measurable data, you cannot prove anything experimentally. Next thing is the nature. Now, if you're talking about the nature of research, descriptive research is definitely non-empirical. That means it is not measurable. Correlational research is somewhere in the middle. That means it can be non-empirical, it can be empirical, but experimental research is definitely empirical. That means it is measurable, mathematically provable. And the last one is purpose. When we're talking about purpose, descriptive and correlational research is explorative. It explores the possibilities, the behaviors, attitudes of people. But experimental research is conclusive. You can come down to a certain conclusion, a short conclusion. Now, these 4 aspects of research, I have clubbed it under one heading. The next one I'm going to show you is a standalone factor, which is what kind of purpose, function, use do different research have. So in terms of that, in terms of utility and what kind of research people should undertake, you have fundamental or formal research. Now, if there is a general problem that the whole world is facing, and you want to undertake formal research, and you want to go into experimental research, then fundamental research is there. But if you have local problems, you're a school teacher and you find that in your class, 3 of your students are not able to read properly, no matter how much you scold them, motivate them, they are not able to read aloud properly. So you identify these 3 kids have a problem. So when you do something immediately to sort out a problem for those 3 kids, what you're doing is you're engaging into applied or action research. So fundamental research is for a general problem that the world is facing. Applied or action research is for an immediate problem that is right under your nose and you're trying to find a solution to it. About these 2, I will explain in more detail in the next slide, but before that, I'll go to another aspect of research, is the the time and depth required to do a study. So you have a longitudinal study and you have a cross-sectional study. In the next slide, I'm going to show you the difference between longitudinal and cross-sectional. So here, I want to study how a child acquires the mother tongue. So I start observing the child from the time he was born, and from the time after 5 years, 10 years, and I continue studying the same child for the next, 16 to 18 years. This is known as a longitudinal study. That means I'm, looking at the same subject for a long period of time. This is longitudinal study. Now, because longitudinal study expects you to, keep on observing your subject, you cannot have multiple subjects. For example, it is not possible for a researcher to observe 100 people at the same time for the next 3 years. So what you do is you cut it down to maybe 2 or 3 people, or at the most. I have seen very good linguists researching with their own child. From the time that they were born, they have started recording and documenting their child's progress. So this is known as a longitudinal study. But in today's time, people and researchers do not have the patience to go for longitudinal study, so they prefer the cross-sectional study, where they take up a study at a specific point of time. So instead of looking at someone from 1965 to 1990, I just want to do a research in 1995, and for that I take maybe 100 people across the demography, and I study them. So this is known as a cross-sectional study at any given point of time. Now, cross-sectional study, the advantage is that it takes you very little time to do a cross-sectional study, maybe a month or 2 at the most for a cross-sectional study. And because the time period is less, you have the luxury of including a lot more people in your sample group. So if you're looking for, quick results, then cross-sectional studies for you. But if you don't mind investing in time because you're really doing something that has a lot of depth to it, then you must be going for longitudinal study. Okay, next I'm going to be talking about what type of research should you undertake. A lot of school teachers, I've noticed, think that research is something only done by PhD students, and research is only done something if you have to move from a lecturer grade to maybe an assistant or an associate professor grade, but that is really not so. Anytime you are looking at options, trying to figure out a best practice, you are engaging in research. So what type of research should you engage in? Now, as I said in one of the previous slides, that there is fundamental and formal research, and on the other hand, you have action or applied research. Now, I'm going to go a little bit into depth in this. Now, when we're talking about formal research, first of all, you need a lot of training in formal research, because you need to read up about multiple theories that experts have written before that. So formal research makes you spend a lot of time in reading up what others have said in the field. And then once you understand what others have said, you get into practice in your field. You start collecting data and you start applying it. So it is a combination of theory plus practice. But when you're talking about action research, you don't bother to read who has written word. You don't need to go back into the past. You see a problem in front of you, you jump into help, and you just indulge in practice. So this is known as action research. Next difference is that formal research is a lot more complex, because you have to really go through rigorous training. There's a different methodology you have to follow. In fact, PhD students, they might have to undergo a whole year of training in research methodology just to be prepared to undertake a research. So it's complex. Whereas action research is straightforward, simple. You see a problem, you tackle it head on, and you find a solution to it. There is no nonsense involved in it. So formal research obviously is a long-term venture. I took 7 years to complete mine, which is really long because I just did not know how to go about it. But on an average, people take anything between 3 years to 5 years to complete a good formal research. But action research is a very short-term thing. It can be sorted in a week's time. It can be sorted in a month's time. It can be sorted within 3 months' time. So action research is more result-oriented, and you can see the results immediately. Now, In the next slide, I'm going to be talking about formal research. For formal research, you can take up anyone as a sample. Anybody who is involved in that particular area, you can take up as a sample, and that's why the sampling is known as random. But in action research, you will not take up random students. In your class, 3 students are unable to read fluently. Only those 3 people need your intervention. So you will pick up only those 3 students. And that is why the sampling in action research is specific. Now, because formal research, the sampling is random, what you do is after you find your, you get your findings, you generalize it, you to generalize it to the world. But in action research, you have a problem with these 3 students, you find out a way to help them, and whatever you find, you apply it only those 3 students. You do not go about publishing your findings for all the world to try and use it, because this what you have found might be applicable only for these 3 students. It might not work for the entire world at large. But when you're talking about formal research, the beauty of formal research is that you take a random sample of 20 people, but you use statistical calculation, and now you can confidently say that, okay, this research, if this method has worked for 20 people, it will work for 20 million people. So why do we need statistical research? We need statistical research to take a small sample and make it applicable, the findings, to the world at large. But statistical research is not required for action research. Why? Because you have 3 students with a problem, you find a solution, you apply it to the 3 students, and you're not bothered about generalizing your finding to the entire world. And hence, you don't need to get into statistical analysis. So when we're talking about action research, I feel that for school teachers, action research really makes sense because you're working at the grassroots level, and for you it is important and easy to identify and quickly help the students. Now, in terms of what returns do you get in terms of research? Now, when you're getting into formal research, if it's a good empirical study, any international journal will accept your study. When it is an action research, do not let it go to waste. You can go and create an account in Education Resources Information Center, and you can upload your findings. This is also very, very important research. Though it might be at a small scale, it might be localized problem, localized solution, but it is still something that other people might want to know about. So I would request that all of you are watching this webinar, please go and make an account in ERIC, and you will find a lot of other people interested in research have put in their efforts. This is a database. This is basically a database for researchers where you can upload your content. Okay. Next, I'm going to be talking about some of the upcoming areas of research in the language. So far, I was really establishing a background to the topic today. Now I'll be talking about the upcoming areas of research in language, and I already gave you a hint that we are not going to look into disciplinary research anymore. It has already been exhausted. We are going to look into multidisciplinary research. So I'm first going to talk about what makes a language. Now, when I was in my master's, the degree during that time, there were so many terms like semantics, morphology, lexicon, vocabulary. I would be very, very confused. And I realized that we are unable to cut down things to a simpler level, and it would help people to, have a very basic understanding of these things. So I have classified language in 3 ways. The first one is the form of the language. Now, in terms of form, the formal structure, you have the sound of the language. So if I make a sound like p, b, d, d, these are the sounds, the units of the language, and then you put them together and you're able to form a word. Now, after you have the sound of the language, next comes the word structure. You're not only putting together sound, but you also have a logic to it. For example, the dog sound is a singular, but if I just add a s, morpheme ending or suffix, you can say, a simple S ending to a dog will change the dog to dogs and will make it a plural. I want to I want to convert the verb jump to jumped. I just add the ed form. So these are basically rules, and this is known as morphology, how a word is formed and what is the logic behind the formation of word. So sound of the language is phonetics, okay, phonemes and phonetics, and word structure is morphology. Then we have the sentence structure, what part of speech will come in which part of the sentence, how is it structured, this is your syntax. And then this entire thing is the form of the language, the building blocks of the language, the sound, the word structure, and the sentence structure. The next part of language is meaning. Obviously, if you have sounds and if you have words, we apply arbitrary meanings to every sound that we make, every word that we pronounce. Now, in terms of meaning, it is nothing but vocabularies. People call it semantics. It's a difficult word. I prefer to call it simple meaning, vocabulary, word list. Now, when you're talking about words, words are of two kinds. Content word. For example, if I say the word lion, you can immediately understand that I mean that particular creature in the forest. But if I see a word like the, and, or but, in itself, they do not carry any meaning. These words are used to construct a word. So these are known as functional words. So all you need to do is have a possible set of vocabulary to start speaking. And once you understand once you have acquired the form and the meaning, the last part is to use this language for everyday communication. But in order to use it for everyday communication, you also need to interact with people. You also need to understand social norms like turn taking. If somebody's talking, you need to keep quiet and listen. If somebody's greeting you, you need to greet back. If somebody's questioning you, you need to answer back. So these are just social norms, rhetorical skills that you acquire while you're using the language. Okay, now in the next slide, I'm going to be talking about linguistics. Now, the word linguistics sounds so fantastic. Somebody asking me, and I would say, okay, I teach language, but then I thought that I'm also studying language. So what stops me from calling myself a linguist? So even though it's a more fancier word, it can be applied to anybody who studies a language from a scientific point of view. So when we're talking about linguistics, linguistics are divided into two. It's divided into two types of studies. One is theoretical linguistics, what I covered in the previous slide. That means the form of the language and the meaning of the language. So it has your phonology, it has morphology, syntax, it has semantics, that means the meaning, it has pragmatics, how do you use it. But when you're looking at the other aspect of linguistic studies, it is applied linguistics. And this is where our interest lies, because a lot of research has already happened in this area. It's a static area. You cannot possibly add anything more to whatever is already been found out in this area. So if you're looking for areas of research, then theoretical linguistics is definitely not it. You have to move into applied linguistics. Now, what is applied linguistics? Your knowledge of language and how you apply it to different fields of living. So under applied linguistics, you have psycholinguistics, it is social linguistics, ethnolinguistics, historical linguistics, clinical linguistics, forensic linguistics, and you have computational linguistics. And I have highlighted the last 3 out of the 7 in red because a lot of research has already happened in the first 4, but we still are researching and we have a lot of scope in the remaining 3 at the bottom, that is clinical research, forensic research, and computational research. And I have already given you a sneak peek about what kind of research is happening in these areas. Now, when you're talking about the theoretical linguistics, it's a micro level. That means you're looking at the word level, you're looking at the sentence level, and you're looking at use in isolation. So this is at a micro level. But when you're talking about applied linguistics, you're looking at a broader field, and hence it is at a macro level. Now, when I'm talking about applied linguistics, another thing to be noted here is that applied linguistics is interdisciplinary. That means in order to do research in social linguistics, you might, psycholinguistics, you might need the help of a psychologist. In order to do, social linguistic research, you might need the help of an anthropologist. For ethnolinguistics also, you might need the help of a historian. You might need the help of a doctor, a neurologist for clinical. You will need the help of a computer professional. So hence this is interdisciplinary, and this is our area today. But I want to show you the relation of these areas of applied linguistics, and how they're interrelated. They are not standalone areas of research or study. So I have made the diagrammatic representation here. This is a Venn diagram. Now, psycholinguistics is at the individual level, right? And then we have social linguistics. Now, a person is a part of the society. So psycholinguistics is nested within the larger square of social linguistics, and hence it is here. Next, social linguistics is a part of ethno-linguistic society, is a part of a broader culture, and a culture is a part of a broader timeline of history. So all the research that you're going to do, this is how they are related. That within historical linguistics is ethno-linguistics, within ethno-linguistics is social, and at the very center of it is the individual learner and how they process language. Now, what about the three new upcoming areas that I was talking about? Now, in terms of clinical linguistics, it deals with the brain, it deals with the disabilities, so it is to do with psycholinguistics. But when I'm talking about forensic linguistics or computational linguistics, it has the individual aspect to it. It also has the social aspect to it. And hence, I have put it somewhere in between social linguistics and psycholinguistics. So now that I've explained that this is the entire field of research that is open for us now, this is interdisciplinary research that you can move towards. So now I'm going to be looking at some of the interesting topics. Now I'll try to quickly run through them. Psycholinguistics are nothing but study of the brain and how the brain picks up a language. So you have the Broca's area here that helps you to produce speech, and you have the Wernicke's area here, which helps you to understand language, process language. Now, when we're talking about psycholinguistics, it has only three aspects to it: how you try and understand the language, how you make sense. Once you make sense of the sound system and the meaning, then you try and acquire the structure of it. Once you acquire the structure of it, you look towards production of the language. So these are the three areas basically under psycholinguistics. And when I'm talking about potential areas in psycholinguistics, you have monolingualism, multilingualism, and intelligence. Okay, so let me give you an interesting area of research. Now, English people or Americans, they mostly can speak only English, so they're monolingual. But we Indians, we can speak on average 3 to 4 to 5 languages. And research has shown that people who are multilingual are less likely to suffer from Alzheimer's disease, and they develop intelligence at a faster rate than people who are monolingual. So this is still continuing research. There's nothing very conclusive that has been, people are still working towards. So this is a very important aspect of research, where you should be trying to make an effort to make your child multilingual. Instead of trying to teach the child only maybe English or maybe Hindi, you should be trying to make your child learn more languages, because multilingualism has somewhere been associated with better intelligence. Next is call versus traditional language learning. Computer assisted language learning is call. Nowadays, I see my nephew and all, they've picked up English from the cartoon series that they see on TV, and my nephew can speak exactly in the intonation that he hears on TV. Now, that is also a sort of computer assisted. Maybe it's on TV, but computer assisted learning is also very similar. Now, does a child learn a language better when it is interacting with an impersonal thing like a laptop or a TV, or does a child learn better when he's actually interacting with people around him who make mistakes, who have feelings, who have attitudes, emotions? So, this is again an interesting area of study, how people learn faster, better, and what kind of human beings they become if they learn through computers or they learn through interaction with people. Next is mother tongue versus immersion for teaching a foreign language. In my school, we were charged a fine if we were caught talking in Bengali or in Hindi. That's because I come from a school where they believe in the immersion technique. You have to teach someone English, you have to speak in English. Now, we could not speak too much of English, and yet we were forced to speak in English. So immersion means is the sink or swim. Throw them into the water, either they learn to swim or they drown. So, and the other one, which is prevalent in today's time, where they feel that why struggle to teach someone a new language in the new language. Target language in the target language teaching is very uphill task. So why not use the mother tongue of the learner to ease the learning process of the target language of the foreign language? Very important areas of research. Learning styles. We have different types of learners. Some people learn better by observing, by somebody gives me a written recipe, I cannot follow, but if I watch it on YouTube channel, I can follow it better because I'm a visual learner. Okay. Next is you have read and write learners, you have kinesthetic learner. Somebody might not learn from YouTube just by looking at somebody else cook. They have to cook themselves and then they will pick up something better. Kinesthetically, they have to involve themselves to learn better. So learning material needs to sort of address the learning style. So it cannot be the same kind of learning. So when you're talking about task based teaching activities, game, problem based, all of them again are a part of your social linguistic research. And the next one is role of multiple intelligence and language proficiency. During our time, we just had two measures of intelligence: either you're mathematically intelligent or you're verbally intelligent. But nowadays we have at least 9 or 10 different uh, types of intelligence. So how does your language learning relate to multiple intelligence is also a very upcoming area of research in psycholinguistics. Next, I'll be moving to sociolinguistics, and here is study of language in relation to how it is used in society. And when I'm talking about society, your society is made up of your friends, family, how you speak to them, what kind of gender roles are there. For example, India is more of a patriarchal society where the men are in a stronger position. But if you go to Shillong, where you have the Garos and the Khasi tribe, it's a matriarchal society. So different gender roles play a role. Religion plays a very major role in the kind of society that is formed. Status, what kind of power, what kind of status you have, the age that you belong to, the kind of education, level of education, the ethnicity, which part of the country you come from, whether you come from the urban areas, whether you come from the rural areas, and most importantly, how much money you have in your pockets. All of them go into deciding the kind of society that you stay in. And the kind of society that you stay in affects your language, and the language also in a way affects. So it's a two-way process. So in terms of language in society, I want to draw attention to a few things. In a country like India, where we are multilingual, we use English, we use other languages. So one aspect is language shift. I have noticed two Indians meeting for the first time and they launch into vehement English, even though we are both brown skinned. Why don't we speak in Hindi? It's because we feel that English will make us appear more intelligent, more attractive, and somehow smarter. So, what we do is we shift from one language and start speaking in the other language. We choose English over Hindi, maybe. And this leads to stratification of language. Stratification of language means the superiority that you assign to different languages. So, to us Indians, we Indians are great Anglophiles. Anything that has a white birth certificate, we're extremely enamored of it, and we hold English at a much higher a prestige level than anything else. And we judge people on whether they can speak English and to what kind of English they can speak. So this is known as a stratification of language. This is a very interesting aspect of research, because people lose jobs, people get jobs on the basis of the kind of language they speak. The next is borrowing. If two languages come in contact, what happens? The poorer language starts borrowing from the word rich language. For example, English was always a poor language, and they started borrowing from the French people, they started borrowing from the Greeks, from the Latins. Similarly, when the Portuguese people came to India, the people in the Konkan coast, the western coastline, the coastline, they started borrowing heavily from Portuguese. And today, what we have is a creation of a Portuguese Creole, which is spoken by people maybe in Daman and Diu. And you can actually go and research and see how, once you start borrowing heavily, you actually end up making a whole new language. You go to the pidgin state, from pidgin, you go to creolization. This is a very technical aspect, but you can have a look at it. It's very interesting to study. And the entire coastline of India is a very good example of creolization. For example, the colonizing countries, France, what do you call it? The Spanish people, the Portuguese people, they were all into going and capturing. So if you go to the islands, mostly Caribbean islands and all, Haitian islands and all, you will see that they are all using different versions of French Creole. This is an aspect of study. And the next one is language variation. I have seen people laughing at people's accent because we again are very uppity about the different standard and non-standard variety of dialects. Then we have registers. What is a register? Okay, have you heard lawyers speaking? They have a very funny way of speaking, which normal people don't use. For example, I declare in complete consciousness and all. Who speaks like this? But legal people speak like this. So words which are specific to a particular profession is known as a register. So the medical profession people have a particular way of speaking. For example, you will hear the politicians of India. They have a particular style of speaking. They have a particular set of words, vocabulary that they use. So these are all studies in register. So an interesting area of research that I came across is they tried studying the register of all the American presidents, and they divided the presidents into successful tenures and unsuccessful tenures, and they tried to study the register of these politicians, and a very interesting research came out of it. So there's a lot of possibility. In India, I have noticed that a lot of the nursing staff comes from Kerala. Now, these women from Kerala, they do not speak a single word of English, but most of these Keralite nurses are placed in different parts of the world because of their professional skills. Now, within 6 months' time, they're expected to pick up the language because they have to give certain sort of English tests before they can placed in different countries. So a lot of research has gone into how and what kind of training these kind of nursing staff go through so that they are able to speak at least some amount of medical English within 6 months' time. So next, I'm going to be talking about the potential areas in social linguistic, economic status and language, perception and attitude towards foreign languages, and prestige of foreign languages. In India, we always put English at the topmost of everything else, and it is sad to say that I could have conducted this webinar today in Hindi, but I still chose to do it in English because maybe my Hindi is not really up to the mark. It also talks about our attitude towards our own language. And I want to share a very interesting thing that I noticed in the Mumbai University. They have a department called African Studies, but they're just a fistful of people who have enrolled for African Studies. But there is always a waiting list of people getting into English studies. So this is basically, how we perceive a language, the usefulness of the language, the prestige of the language, motivation on second language acquisition. Whether you want to learn English because you love the language, or you want to learn English because you want to settle abroad, you want to get a better job, all of these are a good, area of research. Gender roles and language, how women use language and how men use language. A very simple understanding is men use a lot more abusive words when they're speaking. Women use a lot more emotional words they're speaking. So, very interesting areas. Political influence and language. With the new government, the NEP has come in, and the NEP insists that you should be using the mother tongue in the primary sections, so that the concepts are drilled in the mother tongue. So these are all political influence and how a language is a part of it. Language learning and environment, and here you see language learning and the different social and professional networks that you have. So these are some of the potential areas of research. I'll quickly move on to the next one, which is ethnolinguistics. study of language in terms of culture and how they both affect each other. So when I'm talking about culture, you have so many things. A language is a part of a culture, the communication that you use that language for, interaction, whether you're using the language for professional interaction, for just chilling out with friends, maybe. Then you have roles, you have responsibilities, the role of maybe a parent, the role of a leader. Then you have expectations, in India, we have expectation that the son will take care of the parents. We don't expect that the daughter after marrying. So this is all a very cultural affair. Next is we have curtsies, we have customs, rituals, values. All of these come together into a melting pot to form culture. And in terms of potential areas in ethnolinguistics, you have intercultural communication. First and foremost, people are hunting for jobs abroad. Everybody wants to go and settle in Canada, get a PR, because now people have exhausted the American option. There are already too many people. Okay, people are going for studies, people are traveling. We have ample money in our pockets now at time where we can think of world travel. So all of these, a simple collaboration, for example, a filmmaker, maybe a French filmmaker wants to make a film about India. So this is a collaboration and it involves a lot of intercultural communication, world Englishes. The British people are no more the only authority on English. The Queen's English is maybe not the only kind of accepted English. We have world Englishes. We have ethnocentricity and language. Now, this is one area that I really love. Ethnocentricity is the sense of pride in your own culture. So I have seen when Indian diplomats go outside, they opt to speak in English. We bend over backwards trying to learn the language of a foreign country. But if you see Japanese ambassadors, no matter where they are, they might be going to the most powerful country in the world, but they would insist in speaking in Japanese, because I feel they have a lot of love and respect for their own culture and a lot of love and respect for their own language. So they protect what is their own. But for us, we are more keen on what the grass is on the other side. So a lot of, interesting study can happen in terms of ethnocentricity and language. Endangered languages. I was giving the example of Manipuri, how the script almost died out, they revived it. Also, I see in India that, if, say, a Tamilian is married to a Punjabi, I go to their house and I see that they have started speaking in English, and the child never learns either Tamil or Punjabi. And by the time 2 or 3 generations have come, both the languages have kind of died out. So, why is it that we do not, inculcate the same kind of languages that we have as a part of our legacy for the next generation? So these are all part of your, ethno-linguistic studies. Next, I'm going to historical linguistics. How over the ages language evolved, and this is very interesting. Now, there's something called a proto-language, which is the original language that people say existed. We all know the story of the Tower of Babel and how everybody started speaking in a different language because God cursed them with different tongues. But before that, apparently, there was an original language called the proto-language. Now, because of increase in population, there was scarcity of food. If there was scarcity of food, people were forced to migrate to different places. Now, once they migrated, they also faced isolation because there might be a mountain range in between. There might be a river that they have crossed. Now, once they faced isolation, they broke up into different tribes. Different tribes started using a slightly different variation in the pronunciation. So different tribes over a period of time have different dialects. Dialects got fossilized into languages. Now, languages got affected by geography also. Now, a friend of mine to whom I was talking about, she said, like, how can geography affect your language? So here is an example of how geography affects your language. To the English speaking community, there is only one word for snow. But to the Eskimos who live in snow 365 days a year, they have actually 50 different words for the word snow. And this is not something that I've made up. You can actually go and check online. Next is the kind of food that you eat also affects your language. A very interesting example is in India, we are mostly, the larger population is a Hindu population. So India is not very keen as big on beef eating. But if you go to countries where beef is a staple food, you will see that they not only use the word beef, they have actually different words for different parts of the the cattle. So they have the sirloin, the tenderloin. But this is something that India is pretty much unaware of, and it is not there in our language because it's not there in our food culture. Then we have the overall culture, and as a result, what happened from proto language, we have moved from proto language, we have moved to almost 8,000 different languages at the latest count today. Now, in terms of how languages evolved, there are quite a few proto languages you will see, but I could not find a picture that could encompass all the proto languages. I have taken only the Indo-European branch and how the Indian languages, the Indo-Aryan language happened. And you can see yourself, people in the eastern zone, the Bengalis, the Orias, the Chhattisgarhi people, Bhojpuri people, the side. Then, we have, the southern zone, which has, flowered into Marathi, the Konkan languages, and a very small portion of Deccan languages. I'm a little surprised because, almost half of India speaks the Deccan languages. And, then you have the central zone here, which ended up with Hindi, Urdu, Marathi, maybe the MP side, Uttar Pradesh side. And then you have the other sides also, the northeastern side. Yes. Uh, yeah, the northeastern zone, it goes up to Nepali here, and then you have the one that goes up to the north, this Punjabi, Sindhi, and all of them. So you can take your time and have a look at this later, but this is just to show how languages evolved, and this is a very interesting area of study. So in terms of historical linguistics, all the students you have in Hindi, Kannada, other languages, comparative linguistics is where you compare the relatedness of different languages. Etymology is study of root words and how new words are evolving, how old words are maybe getting forgotten. Next, we have glottochronology. This is a very interesting field of study. Glotto or glosso means the tongue. It can also refer to the language. So study of change of language and the sound of language over a period of time is known as glottochronology. And you will see how English has changed from, the Anglo-Saxon time to the Middle Ages to Shakespeare English, Victorian English, and right now we have come to almost like SMS English, which is nowhere near to what English sounded before. Next, you have reviving lost languages, a very important aspect of historical studies, and this is something we must look into. It's sad to say that India had such a strong Sanskrit and Pali culture, but today the maximum researchers in Sanskrit are residing in Germany. Germany has taken a greater ownership of Sanskrit than we as Indians have taken. Next is synchronic versus diachronic. Studying language at any given point of time, for example, language in the 21st century is synchronic studies, but if I study language and how is it evolved over ages, then it is diachronic studies. And then you have dialectology, different dialects and how the variations have come up. Next, these three areas are what I'm really interested in looking at is the clinical linguistics. Any kind of disability, any kind of problems you face and you're unable to use a processed language is a study for clinical linguistics. And disability is divided into three, basically reception disability. If you have problems in the outer ear and the middle ear, if your eardrum is affected and you cannot hear the sound wave system, it is a reception disability. Now, if you are looking at the next one, central disability is when your inner ear is affected. That means the nerve cells going to the brain, to the central nervous system, if they're affected and you cannot hear, this is known as a central disability. And the last one we have is the production disability, where maybe there's a problem with your vocal cords, there's a problem with your tongue, the muscles of your tongue do not move properly, or your tongue is short and thick, or you have problems in your brain and how it relates to these areas, then you have production disability. So in terms of potential areas of study, is one is speech problems, people who are unable to produce speech, known as aphasia. And you also have fluency problems, people who stutter, people who are not able to, produce certain sounds. You need therapy for them. You have hearing disability therapy. We have so many devices that have come up that help people listen in better, but we can still do more improvements. Sign language linguistics, I gave you a very good example of that glove where it can convert your hand gestures to speech. Dyslexic therapy, people who have all these disabilities, they still need to go out and they still need to earn a living. So any kind of strategy or rehabilitation programs for them is also a part of clinical linguistics. And developing learning material or teaching material for people who have a problem in learning a language, all of these are potential areas, and somebody really has to look into these areas. We cannot keep doing research in the same theoretical linguistics on and on. Next one, forensic linguistics. You see so many crime series that I'm sure you're aware of how far linguists have gone in terms of solving a crime. So in terms of crime, you have voice identification, you have authorship profiling. If somebody has sent in a text or a voice message, who is the possible author of this is your authorship profiling. And you also have forensic text. Who possibly can have written this? This is your basic arena of forensic linguistics. And let me just show you some of the potential areas. Now, voice identification, speaker profiling. If you don't look at me and I send in a ransom note, you should be able to identify that I'm a female. I might be around 40 to 45 years of age. I might be coming from West Bengal, but just by listening to how I speak. So all of this is known as speaker profiling. And once you do speaker profiling, you narrow it down to speaker identification and authentication. For example, a message has come in from one of the terrorist groups. You need to identify whether this message was given by Osama bin Laden or one of his cronies. So this is known as speaker identification and authentication. And the next part is quality enhancement. Most of these people are really smart people. So what they do is they use different distortion devices. They distort their message so the original voice cannot be identified. So what forensic linguists do is now they try and enhance the quality of the distorted message so that actually they can go back to the initial message and start profiling the picture. In terms of authorship profiling, the very first example I showed you, how the person who killed that 8-year-old child, he sent a message and he made typical spelling mistakes. This is how he was narrowed down upon, and this was done due to the kind of language he used, the grammar or the punctuation. So this is known as authorship profiling. Authorship profiling is used a lot because nowadays a lot of texts have been recovered from different places, hiding places. So we want to know whether this letter was actually written by Shakespeare. So this can be done maybe by authorship profiling. And the last aspect is forensic text. Emergency calls. Sometimes people make prank calls. So looking at the vibrations of the voice, you want to find out whether it's an actual crisis situation emergency call or is it a hoax. Ransom demands, whether it's a professional kidnapper who has sent the ransom demand, or is it made by somebody who is known to you. Hate mails, somebody within your known circle only would be sending you hate mail. So who possibly? And the suicide letters is very interesting. Sometimes you murder a person and you write the suicide note on behalf of that person. So in order to find out whether the suicide note is actually genuine or is it a fake, all of these are potential areas of forensic linguistics. And people who are forensic linguists are paid a huge amounts because their expertise is so rare that anybody is willing to pay a good amount for their expertise. So these are the areas that we need to make forays into. Next one, the last one, is computational linguistics, how the computer is used instead of the human brain. The human brain is central to understanding language, but we human beings are too lazy. So now we want to give a part of the responsibility of the brain to the computer. So how the computer uses and processes language naturally is computational linguistics. Now, language, when you're talking about computational linguistics, look at the number of people who are involved. You need a linguist, you need a programmer, you need a statistician, you need a psychologist, and you need a sociologist also. All of these people with their expertise together, they build what's known as computational linguistics. Now, when we're talking about natural language, the brain is a fantastic creation of God where, it can understand natural language. Natural language has, say, large vocabulary, the brain can understand. Not only that, a particular word might have multiple meanings. A brain understands that. We use a lot of jokes, we use a lot of puns and wordplay. The brain understands that. We have different accents. The brain understands that. Sometimes we slur our words instead of pronouncing it clearly. The brain even understands that. And we have mispronunciations, which I keep on doing, and people keep telling me this is one word you're not pronouncing properly, but the brain still understands that. And the best part is that, we use missed words all the time. My dad was famous for it. He would say, "Arey, wo leke aao," and we were supposed to understand what that wo means. So if he was sitting down to write, we would understand that maybe he's looking for the pen because right now there's no pen in your hand. So he would say wo leke aao and would understand. The brain can understand this, but the computer is not trained in understanding. Computer is made in such a way that even if there is a single mistake in the comma in a programming, the program will not run. So how do we train our computer to process a natural language is known as natural language processing. This is NLP in terms of computers. Do not confuse it with neuro-linguistic programming. That's a different concept. So when we're talking about NLP, see how the computer is trained to do it. First of all, the computer is trained to break it down into smaller units, like the parts of speech. Then we teach the computer how to break it into the tree structure or, the phrase structure. Then we have something called the knowledge web. For example, if I give a command to Siri, Siri, please tell me if Will Smith ever won a Grammy Award. Now, the Siri needs to go and check all the related information about Will Smith and then extract the information. So the computer needs to have a large web of knowledge from where it extracts information. Next one is statistical patterning. Okay, let me give you an example. Most of the time when we say she was, generally we use an adjective after that. She was happy. Okay, but we generally never use a noun after that. So if Siri hears a sentence like she was happy and she was happy, most of the time Siri would understand that out of 100 times people are saying she was happy, so maybe the word is not happy, but the word is happy. So this is known as statistical patterning, and how the computer goes by probability. Next is it has to understand the waveform of your vocal commands. And the last aspect of the computer in processing language, it should be able to produce speech. Now, initially, you will see that most of the speech in our computers and mobile phones were very robotic in nature. But recently, if you use iPhones, you will notice that they not only have American English Siri, they have British English, and now they have Indian accent Siri also. So, we are constantly making improvements in computational linguistics, and these are areas where your expertise is needed. So you have spell checks, you have, grammar check, like Grammarly and all, you have plagiarism checkers, you have automated e-raters. Now, this is so interesting. 2 years back, I appeared for the IELTS exam just on a whim, and I scored a straight 9 in listening, speaking, and reading. However, I was scored a 7 in writing. Now, I knew that I might not be scoring full marks in writing because it's a subjective affair, but at least I expected to get an 8. So when I found out that most of the essays written for IELTS and all is not really looked or checked by teachers, humans, they are mostly run through an e-rater. So that's the time I realized that the e-raters might not be 100% foolproof, and there's a lot of research refinement that is required. Student automated feedback systems, we get tired of giving feedback to our students, pointing out each and every mistake. The automated student feedback system is wonderful. Then you have information retrieval, extraction, and classification. Google is your information retrieval, Google search engine, and extraction. Now, what I mean by extraction, I suppose I submit a resume to a company, to a software company. Now, a software company might have requirements for developers. They might have requirements for business analyst. They might have requirements for managerial skills. So the extraction part, what they do is they run through all the resumes and they segregate the resumes according to the profession or the profile that they have run. Classification of emails, you will see that a lot of threatening emails might come. So the government is constantly looking through our mails and they're classifying it as harmless or harmful emails. Then we have voice assistants. I don't need to speak about it. Our lives are pretty much run with the help of voice assistants. We have speech synthesis programs. My life has become a lot better because I don't need to type anymore. I just use programs where I can either speak and convert it to text, or from text I can convert it to speech. Either of these ways work. Next is machine translations. There is nothing more interesting than a Google translator, and everything that I don't understand, I run it through the translator. Then you have chat box, question answering systems. Anytime you go to the railway inquiry or you go to a flight inquiry, nobody's sitting behind the inquiry counter to answer you. What you have is a chatbot answering your questions. And next we have, what is the most interesting aspect of computational linguistics is that the computer can understand words and sentence structure, but the computer still cannot understand paralinguistic features. For example, the emotions hidden behind my words, whether I'm really happy when I give you a compliment or whether it's a sarcastic compliment. These are features, tonal features, features of the emotion that the computer is still not trained in using. And this is actually the area that we can all work on. uh, I was thrown out of the sociology department, psychology department, but today I'm smart enough in understanding that if I approach someone and I tell them that I want to write a research paper where we want to work in collaboration, I'm sure people will not throw me out. So that option of multidisciplinary research has opened up. A few words of advice before I end my session. Some of the things that you should not do is don't do research just for the degree or because you would get a better salary. You get into research only if you want to solve an existing problem. Okay, don't choose a topic which has no practical use. How good your research is will not be judged on how long you spent on it, but how useful it is to people. I'm sorry, I cannot come up with an example here. Don't bite off more than you can chew. We feel that a PhD thesis has to be really big, huge, and we take up so much matter to analyze, so much data we collect, that by the time you finished analyzing, it's 6 7 years, and the applicability of the research has died off. Because research topics are applicable only for certain periods of time. So if you're extending your research for too long, the problem that you're trying to solve might not be a problem anymore. So don't take up very large chunks of research. The better researcher is someone who takes smaller projects and goes from one to the other to the other, and that's how you develop your expertise. Next is, don't take topics that every second person will do. Since the lockdown, I have had 40 people getting back to me, minimum 40 people getting back to me, and all of them are doing research on how online teaching has affected the learning process. Now, I'm trying to tell them that every second person will be doing research on this. This is not a good area anymore, because you will never be able to, stand out with the research in this area, because it's already, overdone. So don't take up topics which everybody will think of, and don't take up topics that have short-term use. The online teaching thing might be a flash in the pan. We might be just going back to our old traditional way of teaching. So you need to understand that if you're taking a problem, take up a problem which might be there even after 6 or 7 years. Next is, don't take up topics that are passing. First of all, we have very few language guides in India, and the language guides that we have, they did their research maybe 50 years back, 60 years back, and they're comfortable with theoretical linguistics. So, they might insist that you do an error analysis, but what would you do doing an error analysis? There is already a lot of research done in it. So these kind of topics are passé. Don't go for them. Don't look problems outside the problem, which is right under your nose. Try to solve it. That will give you better research. And don't think that whatever is happening in the West is the thing to do. Many of us do not know that task-based teaching was first developed in India by Dr. N.S. Prabhu, but the Western people are smart enough. They have taken up the concept of task-based teaching, modified with different words, problem-based teaching, this, that, and they're passing it off as their own. So don't look for inspiration elsewhere. You have enough things happening in and around you in India to be able to do your own research. So, stop following in somebody else's footsteps. This is the last slide of my webinar. If you have any queries, you can, WhatsApp me. But in case you do not get the certificate of feedback form, I'm not the person. You can also mail me. And I have recently made my YouTube channel. I would request the technical team, someone from the technical team, to please post the link to my YouTube channel. I would be very grateful to all the participants who are watching. If you take maybe 5 seconds of your time and please subscribe to my channel. I will keep on uploading new material on my channel. And with that, I say thank you from my side.